Reduce Azure cloud costs for SMBs, 7 proven strategies. Hi there. Today we'll talk about reduce Azure cloud costs for SMBs, 7 proven strategies. We'll cover everything you need to know about reduce Azure cloud costs for SMBs. So, let's get started. Why cloud costs spiral out of control for SMBs. Cloud spending feels manageable until it suddenly does not. A few common patterns drive most of the waste, and understanding them is the first step towards successfully reducing Azure cloud costs for SMBs of any size. Idle or forgotten resources. Developers spin up VMs for testing and never shut them down. These instances run continuously and charge you by the hour. Over-provisioned virtual machines. Choosing a larger VM size just to be safe is one of the most expensive default habits in cloud infrastructure. Default storage tiers. Azure defaults to premium storage in many configurations. Most SMB workloads do not need it. No governance on who can deploy what, without tagging policies or spending limits. Cloud sprawl starts quietly and accelerates fast. According to the FlexEra 2025 State of the Cloud report, organizations waste an average of 28% of their cloud budget. For SMBs with tighter margins, that figure often climbs higher because there is no dedicated FinOps team watching the numbers. The strategies below address each of these root causes directly. Strategy 1. Commit to Azure reserved instances over pay-as-you-go. Azure reserved instances are 1-year or 3-year commitments to use specific VM types in exchange for discounts of up to 72% compared to pay-as-you-go pricing. For any workload that runs consistently, this is the single highest impact lever to reduce Azure cloud costs for SMBs that rely on always-on infrastructure. How reserved instances work. You purchase a reservation for a VM family in a specific Azure region. Azure automatically applies the discounted rate to matching VMs you run during the reservation term. You are not locked into a specific VM instance, which gives you flexibility to resize within the same family. Microsoft's reserved VM instances page shows current discount tiers by region and VM family. A D-Series VM that costs $150 per month on pay-as-you-go can drop to around $60 per month on a 3-year reservation. For a deeper breakdown of how this translates to real savings, see our guide on reducing cloud costs by 40% with Azure reserved instances. When to use reserved instances. Reserve capacity for any workload with predictable usage, production databases, application servers, API gateways, and anything running 24/7. Do not reserve VMs for development or test environments where usage is intermittent. Strategy 2. Use Azure Spot instances for non-critical workloads. Azure Spot instances let you use Microsoft's spare compute capacity at discounts of up to 90% compared to standard pricing. The trade-off is that Azure can evict your instance with 30 seconds notice when that capacity is needed elsewhere. That sounds risky, but Spot instances are well suited for specific workloads. Batch processing jobs, data transformation pipelines, video rendering or encoding, development and testing environments, machine learning training runs. For these tasks, a sudden eviction is a minor inconvenience. Your job restarts on a new instance. The cost savings over time are real and substantial. The distinction between Spot and reserved instances matters. Reserved instances guarantee availability for committed, always-on workloads. Spot instances maximize savings for fault-tolerant, interruptible tasks. Most SMBs benefit from running both strategies in parallel. According to Azure Spot pricing documentation, discounts vary by region and VM family but frequently exceed 80%. Strategy 3. Right-size your Azure virtual machines. Right-sizing means matching your VM size to actual workload requirements rather than guessing high and paying for headroom you never use. This is one of the most direct ways to reduce Azure cloud costs for SMBs without changing a single line of application code. How to identify over-provisioned VMs. Azure Advisor, available in the Azure portal at no extra charge, scans your subscription and flags VMs using less than 5% of their CPU over a 14-day window. These are candidates for downsizing. In practice, many SMBs find that 30 to 50% of their VMs are running at a fraction of provisioned capacity. Steps to get started. Open the Azure portal and navigate to Azure Advisor. Select the cost category. Review the right size or shut down underutilized virtual machines. Recommendations: evaluate each flagged VM against actual usage metrics in Azure. Monitor resize or deallocate based on the analysis. Right sizing does not mean running lean to the point of failure. It means running accurately. If a VM consistently uses 12% CPU on a D4SV3, 4 vCPUs, a D2SV3, 2 vCPUs, handles the workload with headroom to spare at roughly half the price. Our tier-by-tier Azure Cloud Cost Optimization Guide walks through VM sizing decisions in detail for common SMB workload types. Strategy 4. Implement Azure Autoscaling to control spending. Azure Autoscaling automatically adjusts the number of VM instances or containers running based on real-time demand. During quiet periods, it scales down and stops charging for unused compute. During traffic spikes, it scales up to maintain performance. For SMBs, this solves a persistent problem. You have to provision for peak load, but peak load only happens a fraction of the time. Without autoscaling, you pay for peak capacity around the clock. Setting up Azure Autoscaling. Azure Virtual Machine Scale Sets and Azure App Service both support autoscaling with metric-based rules. A basic configuration looks like this. Scale out when average CPU exceeds 70% for 5 minutes. Scale in when average CPU drops below 30% for 10 minutes. Minimum instances: 1. Keeps the app available at all times. Maximum instances: 10. Caps your maximum cost exposure. For containerized workloads, Azure Kubernetes Service supports horizontal pod autoscaling and the cluster autoscaler, which scales both pods and underlying nodes automatically. A retail SMB running a promotional campaign might see 10x normal traffic for 48 hours. With autoscaling, they pay for the burst while it happens and return to baseline cost immediately after. Without it, they either over-provision permanently or risk downtime during peak demand. Strategy 5. Set up Azure Cost Management Budgets and Alerts. You cannot reduce Azure cloud costs for SMBs if you do not know where the money is going. Azure Cost Management and Billing is a free tool built into every Azure subscription that provides spending visibility, budget alerts, and cost allocation by resource. Key features to use: cost analysis breaks down your spending by resource group, service type, region, or custom tags. This is the fastest way to identify your biggest cost drivers and focus optimization efforts where they matter most. Budgets let you set monthly spending limits for your subscription or individual resource groups. Azure sends email alerts when you hit 80%, 90%, and 100% of the budget threshold. You can also trigger automation, such as shutting down non-critical VMs, when a budget limit is reached. Anomaly detection flags unexpected spending spikes automatically, so you catch a misconfigured resource before it runs for a full billing cycle. Tagging strategy for cost visibility: implement a consistent resource tagging policy from day one. Tag every resource with at minimum, environment, prod/dev/test, team, and project. This makes cost allocation reports actionable rather than a single undifferentiated number on a spreadsheet. For a broader framework on managing Azure cloud spending, our Azure Cost Optimization, SMB Savings Strategies Guide covers governance structures and cost allocation models in depth. Strategy 6. Limit cloud sprawl before it drains your budget. Cloud sprawl is what happens when resources multiply faster than anyone can track them. A developer deploys a test environment, finishes the sprint, and moves on. The environment keeps running. Multiply that across a team of 10 developers over 6 months and you have a significant source of invisible waste. Practical ways to limit cloud sprawl: Azure policy. Enforce rules such as requiring cost center tags on all resources or restricting deployments to approved VM SKUs across your entire subscription. Resource groups with expiry. Build deployment pipelines that automatically schedule non-production resources for deletion after a defined number of days. Regular cleanup sprints. Schedule a 30-minute monthly review of unused resources, orphan disks, and unattached public IP addresses. Azure Advisor recommendations. Azure Advisor identifies idle app service plans, empty load balancers, and unattached managed disks automatically. Orphan managed disks are a particularly common and overlooked cost driver. When you delete a VM in Azure, the OS disk is not deleted by default. These accumulate silently over months. A quick audit of unattached disks in a mid-size SMB subscription often reveals hundreds of dollars in monthly savings with no performance trade-off whatsoever. If you are evaluating whether Azure is the right platform for your workloads overall, our comparison of Azure versus AWS versus Google Cloud for SMBs covers how pricing models and governance tools differ across providers. Strategy 7. Optimize Azure Cosmos DB and storage costs. Database and storage costs are often the second or third largest line item on an Azure bill for SMBs. Azure Cosmos DB in particular catches businesses off guard because its pricing is based on request units rather than simple compute time, and the defaults are not optimized for low to medium traffic volumes. Azure Cosmos DB cost reduction tips: use serverless mode for development and low traffic workloads. Cosmos DB serverless charges per request rather than for provision throughput, which is significantly cheaper for spiky or low volume traffic patterns. Enable autoscale on provision throughput. Instead of a fixed RU/S value, autoscale adjusts between 10% and 100% of your configured maximum, so you only pay for what you actually use. Customize your indexing policy. Cosmos DB indexes every property by default. Excluding properties you never query on reduces request unit consumption measurably across every operation. Azure Storage Tier Optimization. Azure Blob Storage offers 3 access tiers with meaningfully different cost profiles. Tier Best for storage cost: access cost hot, frequently accessed data; highest lowest cool data access less than once per 30 days; lower higher archive rarely accessed data 180 plus days; lowest retrieval fee applies. Most SMBs default everything to hot tier. A lifecycle management policy that moves blobs to cool after 30 days and archive after 90 days can cut storage costs by 40 to 60% for large datasets. Setting this up takes under an hour in the Azure portal and requires no code changes. Conclusion: the strategies in this guide show that you can reduce Azure cloud costs for SMBs significantly without compromising on performance or reliability. Start with the highest impact items: reserved instances for predictable workloads, right-sizing flagged VMs through Azure Advisor, and enabling cost management budgets today. Then build toward autoscaling, spot instance adoption for batch workloads, and a governance framework that prevents cloud sprawl from returning. SMBs that apply even 3 or 4 of these strategies consistently report savings of 30 to 40% within the first quarter. The budget you recover from cloud inefficiencies goes back into product development, hiring, or the infrastructure that actually moves your business forward. Our team at Q Services works with SMBs every day on Azure cost optimization and digital transformation. If you want a review tailored to your specific environment, reach out for a free Azure cost audit.